Ash Fork Station, Arizona Territory, the 12th of January 1879. A lonely trapper saved an Apache woman from the steel jaws of his own snare, and that snowbound night, between the cold wind and the cabin fire, two lost souls began to relearn the art of trust. The wind cut like iron filings. It hissed down from the Mogollon Rim, slid through cottonwoods and the tired boards of my fence, until the whole line sang in a low, cold wire note. The first sound of the day wasn't birds nor cattle, just that lean winter breath teaching a man to keep his jaw shut and his collar high. I was out early, walking the north stretch where the fence dropped toward the creek. Checking posts, checking wire, checking the old steel traps I set for meat and trade when the herds thinned. Boots crunching frost, hands numb, same work as yesterday and the day before. Monotony holds a man together when the world won't. That was when I saw something that didn't belong to the land. At first it was only a lurch in the brush, a wrong rhythm under the wind, like a cough in a church. Then a dark shape bucked against the snow-stubbled ground. My eyes wanted to say wolf or deer, but my gut knew different. I moved slow, like a man easing a skittish horse, and the world narrowed to breath and pain sound, and the bright, hateful mouth of a sprung-jaw trap. For a long 2 heartbeats I let the wind speak and heard nothing else. I could taste the iron in my teeth. The trees seemed to hold still, needles tight as if they too were watching. Then the shape lifted a face. Not an animal, a woman. Hair black as a crow's wing, skin gone gray with the cold, eyes like polished obsidian cutting back at me. Here's the part no one tells you. Sometimes the land decides your character for you. It freezes you to a single moment and asks a simple question: what are you going to do? Her ankle was caught bad, teeth sunk in deep. Blood had frozen in brown lace across the steel. She didn't cry out. She just set her mouth and stared like the world had already taken enough of her, and she wasn't about to give it the sound of her pain, too. I know the look of someone counting exits. I've worn it. I let my rifle slide from my shoulder to the ground and opened both hands where she could see them. For game, I said. Not for you. For 200 words I could tell you about the way shame sits behind a man's ribs. A quiet animal that doesn't bark unless you leave it alone too long. I could tell you how I'd seen squads drive people south like cattle, and how I'd kept my head down because a man gets tired of being taught what side he belongs to. But the wind was carving lines in my face, and there was a person bleeding on my land, and explanations weren't going to free bone from iron. If you enjoy the story, hit that subscribe button right away, and if you don't, then just hit the like button anyway to keep more Wild West love stories coming. I crouched, hat brim low so she didn't have to meet my eyes. It'll bite again when it lets go, I said, and set my hands on the springs. Cold steel burns. Anyone who's worked traps knows. I pushed slow, steady, so she could measure each inch of what I was doing. The jaws relented with a mean little sigh. Her body jerked once. Not a sound. She pulled her leg back on instinct, heel furrowing the frost. The ankle was swollen and angry purple. I tore a strip from my shirt and bound it, not neat but careful. No lingering touch. A man's hands can speak cheaper than his mouth if he's not careful. I wasn't about to cheapen anything. She watched me as you watch a snake, ready to move only after it has. Water? I asked, holding the canteen out but not closing the gap. She didn't take it at first. That told me she'd had water offered as bait before. At last, thirst argued louder than memory. She drank fast, then slower, like she was reminding herself she was allowed to stop. Name's Gideon, I said. Cabin's not far. You can walk if you lean or not. Choice is yours. 0. She narrowed her eyes, trying my name on the inside of her skull where men get measured. Nalin, she said, not loudly. I repeated it. Didn't get it perfect. Close enough that she let the air go out of her shoulders a hair. I stood. The creek below ticked under skim ice. A hawk drew a black stitch across the sky, then unspooled it. I took a step back so she'd have room to choose, then a step along the line I meant to walk. She tried her weight, winced, chose to follow. The trail through the pines is a long teacher. It tells you what's been through and what stayed. I kept a half stride ahead, not because I wanted to lead, but because you can't catch someone's eyes if they don't want them caught. When the slope steepened, I set my hand out once. She flinched, set her jaw, and made the angle without me. I let the hand fall. A man can mean help and still be wrong. The trick is to leave a gate open without pushing anything through it. My cabin isn't much. One room, a stove with its paint burned off, a bed I knocked together from pine and stubbornness, a table that leans a little to the east because I do, fences sag some. Smoke takes a while to decide which hole to use. I built it the way you build a life after you've spoiled your appetite for company useful first. Pretty never. I opened the gate and stepped aside. She noticed. Folks always notice the one small thing you didn't think they would. Inside, the air smelled of old wood and a winter's worth of ash. She stood by the door, hand on the frame, testing whether the room itself had intentions. "Sit if you want," I said, tossing salt pork into a black skillet, beans after. Grease woke and spoke low. Hunger's an honest language. I kept my back half turned. A woman who's been hunted doesn't need your attention on her like another set of hands. I pointed with my chin to a box on the shelf. Cedar, herb wrap, for swelling, was taught years back. I set it within reach and set myself out of reach. She didn't move for a long count of wood stove ticks. Then she laid a palm on the cedar and nodded, not at me but at the choice. Binding a wound is sacred work in a small way. It's the opposite of taking. I threaded the cloth beneath her ankle slow, so slow the fire sounded loud enough to be heard from town. The herbs cooled the heat in the skin. My fingers were sure because they had to be. When I tied it off, I rocked back on my heels quick, a man done with a thing. She kept her silence like a blade in a sleeve. I kept mine like a prayer that doesn't need a church. We ate without ceremony. Beans don't ask for it. I waited until she took the first bite before I set my plate down. When she was through, I filled her cup again. Water is one of those offers that means too much in a dry land. You don't tie it to words. The bed is a problem you can't talk around when there's only one of it. I set my plate in the tin washpan, let the stove hold the quiet, and said what was true. "Floor's cold. Bed's the only soft thing in the county. I'll take the boards if you want. Or we split it down the middle, and I face the wall." She looked at the bed, then at me, then back to the bed like it might answer the question itself. I kept my hands still and my eyes on the stove door. After a time she said, "Same bed, flat as a verdict. Not a reward, not a threat. Terms." "All right," I said. Night hit early, the way it does when January gets bored with daylight. I lay with my back to her and the wall in front of me, counting knots in the wood until they turned to faces I didn't want to look at, then counting the ticks in the stove instead. I didn't reach for her. I didn't shift. There's a discipline to stillness that most men never learn because they never had to. Her breathing stayed shallow for a long time, the kind of breath that thinks it's a footstep. Little by little it settled. When it did, the cabin seemed to grow into itself, like the walls had finally been trusted with their job. It's a strange thing. Feeling another life, except a roof you've put up with your own hands, makes a man stand straighter inside his bones. I didn't sleep much. Shame and memory keep poor company with sleep. Somewhere between the second and third pop of sap in the stove, I let my eyes slide to the side. Her face in sleep was not the face she'd worn by daylight. It was younger, not softer but unworried for the first time since the trap. It did something fierce and simple to me, made me hope I could hold a line I'd drawn without chalk. Morning came through in thin knives of light between boards. I rose quiet, set water to rise, ground coffee with the heel of my hand. When she stirred, I put a slice of yesterday's cornbread on the table and poured from the pot. She sat up slow and measured the room again like it might have changed while she slept. It hadn't. She ate, and I mended a thought I hadn't known was torn. Out past the porch, a pair of crows argued in the cottonwoods. The sky had that clean, hard look it gets after a night wind skims everything that doesn't belong. I carried wood in and word out. She swept the packed dirt floor with a willow whisk I'd made during a summer of too much time. You can tell a lot about a person by the way they deal with small chores. She worked like every motion restored something stolen from her. When the sun got high enough to find the creek, she tried her weight again. The ankle held better. She made it to the door, touched the jamb, and then let go of it on purpose. I moved to steady her, and stopped with my hand half-birthed out of a habit. She saw the check and some old coil in her loosen. Some men think kindness is a rope. I know it's only a gate. You leave it open. They walk through if they want, or they walk past. Either way, you don't follow with a bridle. By mid-morning, the day had chosen to be bright and mean together. I took her out to the fence line so she could see what this patch of ground was and wasn't. No soldiers camped. No townsmen looking to sell righteousness by the yard. Only fence, creek, sky, the far line of hills, and what a man and woman can carry between them without dropping. She stopped where the trap had been and looked down at the rutted patch of earth. I waited. The wind moved a few pine needles and then gave up. "You set to catch," she said, voice even, "but you let go." It wasn't a question. "I set to eat," I said, "and I let go because a thing can be wrong even if it's legal." She thought about that for a while in the way that makes a man shut up and be grateful he's being allowed to stand nearby. When she was done thinking, she just nodded, like a ledger balanced for the day. We turned then and walked toward the cabin. The world felt no kinder underfoot than it had at first light, but it felt truer, and that's the best you can ask out here. If you like Wild West love stories or Wild West stories, drop a bunch of 1 second and your place in the comments for the Wild West Love channel. Tell me where you're listening from so I don't feel so alone out here. The edge of distance. That afternoon the light slanted sharp through the trees, gold cutting over white like heat remembered. I sat by the porch rail whittling a peg for the fence, watching her test her steps down by the creek. The limp was still there, but she moved, like someone reclaiming her own body inch by inch. Out here, healing's not something you talk about. You just keep doing the small things that keep you alive until one day you notice you're less broken than you were. I'd seen men lose fingers, friends, pieces of faith, and never get any of it back. Watching her work her ankle against the frozen ground, I realized I envied that slow kind of courage, the one that doesn't make speeches. By sundown I had stew going. Venison, beans, and wild onion I'd dug last week before the frost got mean. The smell found her before I did. She stepped into the doorway, face shadowed by the light behind her. "You cook every night?" she asked, tone curious, not mocking. "Every night I plan to eat," I said. She came closer, slow as wind over sand. "Men I've seen eat what others leave behind. You cook like you expect to live." That stuck. Maybe she meant it as a tease. Maybe not. Either way, it felt like she'd walked a step closer to where words start meaning something again. We ate quiet. Always quiet. There's talk that fills a room and talk that steadies it. This was the second kind. Halfway through the meal, she said, "You don't ask me questions." Never figured I had the right. Her eyes searched me a while. Most men think they do. Most men think too loud. That pulled a breath from her that might have been a laugh. The kind that hides in the corners of the mouth like a secret not ready to live outside yet. It was enough to make the fire look warmer. Later, when the bowls were rinsed and the night came crowding through the cracks, she stood by the window. Snow dusted the sill like ground bone. "You keep a rifle ready for men or for beasts?" "Both bite the same," I said. She nodded, gaze fixed on the dark. "In my village, we used to say the land remembers every step, even the cruel ones. Maybe that's why it hurts to walk it." I wanted to answer but didn't. Some truths just need to hang in the air until they decide to land. When she finally turned back, she asked, "Why live alone?" I poked the fire, watched sparks climb like little prayers too wild to stay. "Because I got tired of owing answers. In town, everyone wants to know what you've done, who you used to be, who you buried. Out here, the land asks for sweat and silence. Both I can afford." Her eyes softened a fraction. "Silence can be a cage." "It can be," I said, "or a roof." She didn't reply, but something in her eased. The stove's glow brushed her face, and I saw not the hunted look from before, but a woman taking measure of a man the way a hawk measures wind, deciding if it'll hold her. When I banked the fire for the night, I expected her to take the bed's far edge again. She didn't. She lay closer, though still with space enough to pass a ghost between us. Her breathing steadied sooner this time. I lay there counting each one, the way you count heartbeats of a horse you're still not sure will let you ride. Morning brought thin sun and the low groan of branches heavy with snow. She woke before me, swept the floor, and fed the stove without a word. That's how I knew trust was starting. Trust doesn't announce itself. It just starts doing chores. We spent the day mending traps, her watching as I reset one with careful hands. She asked questions. Why bait near the log? Why leave the scent? Her voice held interest now, not accusation. I answered plain, and when she pointed out a better spot closer to where deer had rubbed the bark, I listened. Hell, I even moved it. You could have knocked me over with a feather by how much that surprised her. When a woman's been treated like she's less than, the first time her advice is taken hits harder than any compliment. That night, while I patched the roof with pine pitch, I caught her humming. Just a low tune, no words I knew. The sound threaded through the dark like a line tying me to something human again. Later she said, "The song's for the ones who didn't come back. From war? From anywhere." The silence after that felt clean, not heavy. 3 days passed that way, quiet rhythm, steady work. Her ankle grew stronger. She began stepping outside alone, filling the pail, sweeping snow from the porch. Sometimes she'd pause to stare toward the far ridge, where the sky looked like it was holding back secrets. I didn't ask what she saw. You don't ask a hawk why it circles. You just make sure your chickens are safe. Then came the sound of hooves. I was out by the shed, splitting kindling, when the rhythm hit the dirt road. 2 horses, slow but sure. The kind of pace men keep when they've decided what they're taking before they see it. I caught her eyes through the open door. She was already frozen still, skillet in hand. Fear rolls off people like heat. You can feel it on your own skin. I told her, "Stay inside." She nodded once, jaw tight, no argument. 2 riders broke from the tree-lined dusty coats, guns low, smiles thinner than paper. Evening light painted everything copper. I stepped onto the porch, rifle in my hand but down. "Evening," I said. "Fine place you got here," the taller one drawled. "Heard there's water close. Creek a half-mile north. Help yourselves." His partner grinned. "We could use a little more than water. Fire, food, maybe company." His gaze slid toward the cabin door. Didn't take a prophet to read the hunger there. "Cabin's mine," I said. "Food's counted. Move on." "Reckon that rifle's worth more than you think," the tall one said, leaning forward. "Could buy you a whole night of peace if you hand it over." I shook my head once. Peace doesn't come for sale. For a heartbeat, nobody breathed. The shorter one shifted in his saddle, hand too close to his gun. I kept my stance easy, like I wasn't scared, which was half true. The other half was just tired of men who thought fear was a language. "You boys push. You'll find a fight," I said. "I ain't looking for one, but I won't run from it either." They saw it, the line in the dirt that wasn't moving. Maybe they heard the tone that says a man's ready to meet his maker, but only on his own terms. They spat, cursed soft, and turned their horses. Pride doesn't walk away quick, but it always walked. When the last hoofbeat faded, I lowered the rifle and went inside. She stood by the table, knuckles white around the skillet. Her breath came shallow and fierce. I poured her a tin cup of water, set it down, and said nothing. Words would have cheapened what silence already knew. That night, the wind picked up. The cabin moaned against it, boards shifting like old bones. She sat by the fire, staring into the embers. I could see her replaying the moment men at the door. Choice balanced on my trigger finger. "You didn't give me away," she said finally. "Didn't seem right. Would have been easier." Easy's never been much of a teacher. Her eyes lifted to mine, steady, dark. "You talk like a preacher, only when I'm sober." That earned me the first real laugh I'd heard from her, a sound quick and raw, gone before I could name it. But it left something warm behind. She leaned back then, exhaustion replacing fear. "Maybe you ain't like the others," she murmured. "Maybe I'm still trying to prove that," I said. Outside, the wind rattled the shutters like an old warning. Inside, the stove held steady, same as us. If you like Wild West love stories or Wild West stories, drop a bunch of 1 second, and your place in the comments for the Wild West Love channel. Tell me where you're listening from so I don't feel so alone out here. Hey there, friend, take a moment and get yourself a full glass of water. Your body will thank you. The Shape of Quiet. The day after those riders left, the air felt different. Not warmer, not safer, just cleaner, like the land itself had exhaled. The kind of stillness that doesn't last but feels holy while it does. I fixed the latch on the barn door that morning. She was at the creek, rinsing the tin cups, her limp barely showing now. When she came back, her hair was damp with meltwater, bits of pine clinging to it. The sight struck me in a way I hadn't been hit in years, quiet, sharp, somewhere between pain and peace. I busied myself stacking wood. A man works best when he's trying not to think. But she had a way of filling a room, even from the yard, without saying a word. By noon, the snow started again, small and lazy, flakes drifting sideways in the wind. We stayed in the cabin. The world turned to gray glass outside. She sat by the fire, sorting herbs she'd gathered before the frost bit deep. The smell filled the air, sage, juniper, something sweet I couldn't name. "You know what each of those does?" I asked. She looked up. "My grandmother taught me, before soldiers came." "What happened to her?" "She stayed behind to bury the bones they left. They didn't let her finish." I didn't ask more. You don't ask a person to walk barefoot over their own grave. She kept working, voice low. "You carry ghosts too. I see it in your eyes." I gave a dry chuckle. "Ghosts? Maybe. Some folks call it regret." She nodded, as if the two were the same thing. "Maybe they are." The stew simmered while daylight thinned. I watched the window fog, watched her reflection in it more than I watched her face. It's easier that way to look without trespassing. When we finally ate, she said, "I heard you talking to those men. You sounded calm." "Wasn't calm. Just out of practice, panicking." Her lips curved, the smallest smile. "You didn't look scared." "Doesn't mean I wasn't." She studied me like she was mapping the fault lines of a mountain. "You've seen death before." "I've seen it and invited it to dinner a few times. Never got along, but we keep meeting." That made her laugh quiet, but real this time. The sound did more to thaw the room than the fire. Later that night, she took the wooden horse from the shelf, the one I'd carved years back. She turned it in her hands, thumb tracing the grain. "This yours?" "Was. Made it for a friend's boy. Fire took the family. Guess I kept the horse." "Why?" I thought about that. Maybe to remember what hands can make, not just what they break. She placed it back gently, and for the first time I realized she wasn't afraid to touch something that was mine. That was its own kind of peace. Days settled into rhythm again. She swept, cooked when I was out checking traps, patched my coat where the seam had given up. Never because I asked, always because she chose. That choice meant more than any word she could have said. I started to forget what the world sounded like without her footsteps in it. That scared me some. A man can get used to kindness, and that's dangerous when the land keeps score. One evening, after a long silence, she asked, "When the snow deepens, what do you do?" "Same as now. Chop, hunt, wait it out." "Alone?" "Always." She looked toward the door, frost curling at the corners. "I used to think being alone meant freedom." "Sometimes it does," I said, "until you realize you've built a cage with your own hands." Her gaze met mine, then steady, unreadable. "And if someone steps inside?" I set the kettle back on the stove and said, "Then it's not a cage anymore. It's shelter." We didn't speak after that. We didn't need to. The fire spoke enough for both. The next morning, she woke before dawn. I heard her moving, quiet as a ghost, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. She stood at the door, watching the snow fall soft over the ridge. I could tell she was thinking of her brother, the one still missing out there in that wide, white world. I poured 2 cups of coffee, handed her one. Her fingers brushed mine by accident, and neither of us pulled away fast enough. Just a second, maybe 2, but it felt like the earth remembered how to spin again. She said, "You could have let me die in that trap." "I could have," I answered, "but the world's full of things that already want us dead. Didn't see the need to join 'em." Her eyes softened, and the edge she'd carried since that first day seemed to dull. "You talk like a man trying to atone." "Maybe I am." "For what?" "For every time I kept quiet when I should have stood up." She stared into her cup. "Then maybe this is your standing up." Outside, The sun fought its way through the clouds. The light hit her hair like copper fire, and for the first time I saw something like peace cross her face. "Not joy, peace," she said. "When spring comes, I'll find my brother. Then we'll start when the thaw hits," I said. "No one should have to look alone." She blinked, surprised. "You'd come with me?" Already came this far. For a heartbeat, the room was silent except for the crackle of the fire. She looked at me like she was seeing the first sunrise after a long war. And maybe she was. The land outside didn't care who we were or what vows we'd broken. It only cared that we were still breathing, still trying. That's all survival ever really asks. That night, the wind rose again, fierce and endless, and yet the cabin felt steady. Not because it was strong, but because for once, I wasn't facing it alone. "Hey there. Friend, take a moment and get yourself a full glass of water. Your body will thank you. If you're watching on TV, don't hesitate, grab your phone and hit subscribe to my channel so you'll never miss out on our amazing characters." The paper under the bed. The first real freeze came sudden, like a knife slipped between ribs. One morning the creek was running. By night it was a pane of cloudy glass that moaned under the weight of the stars. The smoke from the stove turned blue in the air. The kind of cold that makes men dream of company, even the kind they once ran from. We'd been living side by side for near a month by then. The rhythm between us had settled her sweeping, me splitting logs. A few words shared here and there like trade goods between wary nations. But that night, with the snow piling higher than my boots outside the door, the quiet changed shape. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was waiting. I'd been carving a peg by the fire, the smell of cedar sharp in the air, when she spoke. "When the storm breaks," she said, "I'll start looking for my brother again." I nodded. "You still think he's alive?" She met my eyes, steady. "I have to." The way she said it, calm, unbending, hit me harder than if she'd shouted. Faith's a strange thing. You don't notice how much you've lost until someone stands in front of you still holding theirs. I poked the fire and said, "Then I'll help you look." She frowned. "You'd leave this place? I built these walls to keep ghosts out. Guess it's time I saw if the world still has room for the living." Oh. For a while we listened to the wind clawing at the shutters. It sounded like memory trying to get back in. When she rose to fetch water from the kettle, I reached under the bed and pulled out a cedar box. Her gaze followed my hands, cautious again, like a deer scenting smoke. I set the box on the table and opened it slow. Inside lay a folded paper and a ring hammered from an old horseshoe nail. She looked at them, then at me. "What's that?" "Ledger paper. From a preacher rides through from Santa Fe every winter. Makes things official: marriages, births, names the law can't erase. I got this one years ago. Never used it." Her brow tightened. "For who?" "For a woman who didn't live long enough to need it." My voice came out rougher than I liked. "Fever took her before spring." Nalin studied my face. "You keep it. Why?" "Couldn't tell you for sure. Maybe hope's a habit you can't kill, even after you think you buried it." "La." She folded her arms, eyes narrowing. "And you show it to me for what? Claim?" "No." I shook my head. "Because you deserve to know it's here. If the preacher comes again and you want your name beside mine, you can write it. If you don't, that's fine too. You walk free either way." Her silence stretched long. The fire cracked, a slow applause for patience. Then she said, "You'd sign before I do?" "In a heartbeat," I said. "My name's got less to lose." "Oh." She turned from the table and stood at the window. The reflection of the firelight caught in her hair, turning it copper. "Men always talk of choice," she murmured. "Few ever mean it." "I mean it." When she faced me again, her eyes had softened, but the steel wasn't gone. "You think paper makes things right?" "Paper doesn't. Choice does. The paper just remembers." She thought about that. Then she walked to the door, wrapped in my coat, and stepped out into the night. I let her go. Sometimes you have to give a person the horizon before they believe you mean freedom. I followed her tracks with my eyes through the frost. She went down to the creek, same flat rock she always sat on. Moonlight found her there, pale and cold, painting her like part of the land. I stayed by the fire, listening to the wind hum through the eaves, wondering if she'd come back. She did. Always knew she would, though I didn't let myself say so. When she came through the door, her face was red with cold and something else I couldn't name. She sat across from me, staring at the box still open on the table. "When the preacher comes," she said, "I'll write my name." I didn't smile. Smiles don't fit moments like that. I only nodded, closed the box, and slid it back under the bed. "Then it's settled," I said. "Not as a chain, but as a start." That night, we lay down as before, but the air felt different. She didn't turn away, didn't reach, either. Just lay still, breathing slow and even. And for the first time, the space between us didn't belong to fear or duty. It was made of something lighter. Choice. Outside, the wind cried itself out. Inside, the stove's glow washed the cabin in soft gold. I felt her warmth through the wool blanket and realized I didn't want to outlive that feeling. Not for long, not for pride, not for anything. Before sleep took me, I whispered into the dark, "You got someone watching over you, Nalin." Her voice came quiet from the other side. "Maybe it's the same one watching over you. If you're watching on TV, don't hesitate, grab your phone, and hit subscribe to my channel so you'll never miss out on our amazing characters." When the snow softened, when the thaw came, it didn't announce itself. The snow just began to lose its shine, turning from white to the color of old pewter. The creek cracked open like a slow confession. The first blackbird sang on a fence post, half in tune, half in defiance. Inside the cabin, smoke rose steady, but the air smelled of change. Spring always does that. It sneaks up, offering another chance to start over whether you deserve it or not. The preacher arrived 2 weeks later, riding a mule that looked ready to retire from life and faith both. His beard carried more frost than his coat, his hands shaking from miles of cold. "Got your name still in my book, Gideon," he said, stepping down. "You plan to use it this time?" I nodded toward the cabin. "She's got a name to add." He smiled tiredly. "Best reason I've heard all winter." We sat at the table, him unpacking the ledger, his pencil short and chewed to ruin. The fire gave just enough light for words to count. He asked our names. I gave mine plain. When it came her turn, Nalin spoke clear, her voice steady as the wind in pine needles. The preacher wrote it just as she said. From the cedar box, I pulled the horseshoe ring. It wasn't much rough, uneven, but it had weight, the kind that means something. I slid it onto her finger, and she didn't flinch. No music, no crowd. Just 2 people, and an old man bearing witness. That was enough. When the preacher left, the snow started again, softer this time, like blessing instead of warning. He waved once, vanished into the trees. I watched him go until the sound of hooves was gone. Inside, the cabin felt smaller, warmer. She sat tracing the ring with her thumb. "Doesn't feel like a chain," she said. "Wasn't meant to," I told her. "Chains don't keep you safe. Choices do." That night we didn't lie apart. We lay side by side, facing the fire, both awake longer than we needed to be. Outside, wind whispered through the cracks, like an old friend trying to find the right word. She said, "When spring's full, I'll go north. My brother might still be out there." "We'll go," I said. "You're not walking that road alone." Her hand found mine, then small, calloused, alive. "If you've made it this far, I know you're a true fan of WWL. From the bottom of my heart, I wish your day is filled with health and happiness, and may a little stroke of luck find you in the next 15 minutes. Don't forget to share it with me in the comments." We spent the next days readying for the road. I mended the saddle straps. She packed herbs and dried meat. The creek ran clear again, swollen from the melt. We followed it, marking where deer had crossed, where roots hid under rock. The world was waking up, same as us. At the ridge above Sulphur Springs, the valley spread wide grass just starting to show through frost, sunlight slicing over everything like forgiveness. She stood there, eyes searching the horizon. "Do you ever think the land forgives what's done to it?" she asked. "Maybe not," I said, "but it lets us keep walking. That's close enough." She smiled faintly. "Then maybe it'll let us find him." "Maybe," I said, and believed it. We turned toward the trail, 2 shadows long in the afternoon light, bound not by blood or paper, but by the quiet understanding that life is just surviving until someone gives you a reason not to run. The wind behind us carried the faint smell of pine smoke, the cabin already fading into the distance. For the first time in years, I didn't look back. The land was still harsh, the sky still too big, but something in it had changed. The same old wind that once felt like iron now brushed soft against my cheek, almost kind. They say the frontier makes a man hard. Maybe it does. But it also teaches him how rare gentleness is and how much it's worth carrying when you find it. That's the truth of every cowboy love story, every Wild West love worth telling. Out here, kindness is the bravest thing a man can offer, and trust is the bravest thing a woman can return. Today's story is about pains that seemed to have no way out until a small ray of light changed everything. Do you believe that, even in the darkest times, there's always a miracle waiting at the end of the road? And if deep down you still believe that God is watching over you, quietly arranging everything, then right now, leave a comment AMEN below this video. Because who knows, at the very moment you write it, a blessing may quietly find its way into your life. Rattlesnake Flats, Arizona Territory, the 3rd of May, 1892. He saved her from the flood 20 years ago. Now she's come back to marry the man who forgot he was still alive. The wind cut like iron filings. It came off the mesas with a rasp, hissing through wire the way a file bites a horseshoe. I was checking fence. Same as most morning step, test, staple, tug work you do when there's no one left to talk you out of it. The land was all bone and glare, greasewood trembling like a fever. Something sat on the horizon that didn't belong to the land. Not a dust devil, not a pronghorn flicker. It moved with purpose, a darker stitch on a sun-bleached shirt. I laid a palm on the top wire, felt it sing with the wind, and shaded my eyes. The shape resolved slow as a memory you don't trust. Horse first, then rider, then a blue bead at a throat catching noonlight. The world narrowed to sound the tick of my breath, the faint creak of leather, the soft thud of hooves against crust, the smell of juniper shadow, the taste of iron in the air. I stopped working. The wire hummed. Even the magpies went quiet. A man learns to read silence out here. Some silences ask a question. Mine asked, "What kind of man are you, Cole?" The answer changes a life. She reined in at the gate like she'd always known the measure of this place. Dark hair braided, skirt the color of a summer storm over the Mogollon rim, boots scuffed honest, shoulders set easy strong without making a poem of it. She touched 2 fingers to her chest in greeting, not quite a wave. I had the foolish thought that the land had been holding its breath for her. "Morning," I said. The word felt like a door unused. "You lost?" "No." Her voice had that riverbed calm you only hear after a flood has taken what it will. I came on purpose. There are men who talk a storm up. I am not that man. I set my pliers down, because the hands need something to do when the heart stirs. Up close I noticed the beadwork red, black, and sky Apache craft if I had to bet a month's beef. She looked me straight and kind, not soft. "You don't remember me," she said. "Can't say I do. Painted Creek," she said. "The night water took the cottonwoods. You wrapped a child in your coat and told her to stay brave." She drew breath. "I am Ilan Tenaya. There are sounds you carry under the ribs for 20 winters and still know at once. Thunder on hardpan, a rope going tight, a child coughing river water onto your sleeve. That night came back whole, the roar, the cold bite, the way the current swung like a mean horse. I remember the little weight against me, the teeth chatter. I remember saying something I hoped was true. Elin smiled, not for my sake, but for truth catching up. "You saved me," she said. I saved the words. I nodded because anything else would be theater. "You made it." "I did," she said. "And I've come to stay." The wind leaned in again. Somewhere far off a steer bawled. I opened the gate, and the day walked through a different man. There was a time I believed the land could be a wife patient, unforgiving, a keeper of accounts. I believed a man could spend what he had on work, and the wind would pay him back in quiet. But quiet is not peace. Quiet is